Can you hear me up the back? Okay, thank you. Well, that was a very kind introduction, thank you, and what a wonderful turnout. If we tried this in Australia on a Friday night, no way. So thanks for coming. It shows the concern, I think, that exists in European countries now for what governments are doing to the people. So that's the cover of my book, and for those who might say after my visit that disregard these ideas because this person knows nothing about Europe because he doesn't live here, and that's the standard thing. They said the same about us in '91, by the way, when the outsiders were saying that the construction of the Eurozone was a crazy idea. And the same argument was, oh, these guys just don't live here, they know nothing about it, forget it. And the same thing is said every time a person from outside comes and looks at the situation and goes, bloody hell, how could this be possible? That's what the book's about. We'll start off with a little equation because I'm an economist. And this is the most basic macroeconomic relationship. And I don't need to read it. Spending equals income equals output. You can't have output unless you've got spending, because output is made in anticipation of sales. And it's spending that then drives employment, because firms won't employ people if they can't sell the output, no matter how cheap the labour is. If they don't want to become inventory stockpilers, they want to sell stuff. And there's no such thing in economics of the real world that you can have growth with spending cuts. It's impossible. So keep that basic rule. That's first year macro, you've just learned it. Move to second year. Now this fiscal deficit mania that has besieged the world, it's international, it's not just European, is built on a series of destructive mainstream economic myths. Now my slides today will have more words than I would normally have, just in case people are struggling to understand my accent. Because when I go to America, people put up their hand and say, "Excuse me, we don't understand a word you're saying." And I say, "Well, I didn't understand the question, sorry." Now, mainstream economists who push this deficit mania have somehow managed to convince policymakers who are otherwise sensible and intelligent, and also the general population who have intuitive intelligence in terms of economics, they've somehow managed to convince those groups that basic macroeconomic rule is false. They've somehow managed to convince everybody that if you cut spending, there'll be growth. Now that's an amazing and a bizarre happening, and we need to sort of deconstruct that and think about it. And when we're thinking about the current crisis, I think about it as a private debt crisis. But somehow the mainstream of my profession have convinced the policymakers that it's actually a sovereign debt crisis. We need to talk about that. Now that basic macroeconomic rule we started with actually defines the scope of government macroeconomic policy. Because what we know as a matter of accounting, it's true by definition, but it's not an opinion I'm presenting here. We know that government deficits, that is the difference between government spending and its tax revenue, is exactly equal, $1 to $1 or €1 to €1 or a penny to a penny, whatever you want to do, to the non-government sector's surplus. So if the government's running a deficit of 3% of GDP, the non-government sector has to be running a surplus of 3% of GDP. Now the non-government sector is made up of the private domestic sector, business firms and households,